In the kingdom of Virulin, nestled between the emerald hills of Etherwood and the misty cliffs of the western sea, there lived a knight who did not crave glory. Sir Cedric of Lorne kept no banners, rode no stallions, and bore no great sword at his hip. He lived in a moss-covered stone cottage outside the village of Windmere, where he tended goats, brewed herbal tea, and read old tales by candlelight. His armor, though once noble and shining, sat rusting beneath a canvas tarp behind his house, untouched for many quiet years. The villagers knew him not for battles won or dragons slain, but for his kindness. He mended fences, taught children to read, and spoke gently even to those who whispered that he had once been something more. Children adored him for the stories he told, of dragons who solved riddles rather than hoarded gold, of witches who spun dreams into tea leaves, and of forests that sang to those who listened. But few knew that Sir Cedric had not always lived so quietly. Once, he rode with the Knights of the Azure Flame, a proud order sworn to defend the realm against darkness that dwelled beyond the old mountains. His name was spoken with reverence then. Songs were sung, oaths were made, and then, as often happens in quiet stories, something changed. A war was won, but not without cost. Friends were lost, and magic, once bright and humming, grew still. The knights scattered. Some turned to politics. Others vanished into the deep woods. Cedric hung up his sword. He came to Etherwood to rest. And yet, on the evening the stars fell low and the wind whispered strange songs through the trees. Cedric knew his rest was ending. That evening, while tending to his garden under a silver dusk, a raven flew down from the treetops and perched on the worn stone fence. Its feathers shimmered with blue-black light. Its eyes were milky white. "Message," it croaked, "from the Lantern Keeper." Cedric wiped his hands on a cloth, eyebrows raised. "Lantern Keeper?" he asked. "That title hasn't been spoken in many years." The raven shook its wings. A scroll dropped from its leg, bound with green silk. Cedric hesitated before untying the ribbon. The parchment was old but strong, inked with careful script. "To the last of the Azure Flame, the lanterns are dimming. One by one their light fades. Etherwood will sleep forever unless the flame is kindled anew. Come to the edge of the Murkmire. Bring no sword, only memory." Cedric read the message twice, then once more. He felt something stir in him. Not alarm, not fear, but a quiet ache, a knowing. He went inside. From beneath his bed, wrapped in old wool, he pulled a small wooden box. Inside was a single object, a lantern no larger than his palm, shaped like a teardrop, with glass so clear it seemed not to exist at all. Inside it, no flame, only shadow. But long ago, that lantern had burned with light drawn from the stars themselves. A gift from the Lantern Keeper, when Cedric had first sworn his oath. He packed lightly bread, cheese, a small pouch of herbs, and the lantern.
No sword.
As the moon rose, he stepped beyond his garden, past the sleepy goats and the swaying foxgloves, and onto the forest path. The wind was singing. The lantern in his hand was cold. But somewhere, far beyond the trees, light was waiting. The path through Etherwood was old, so old, in fact, that it did not appear on maps anymore. It wound like a lazy river between ancient trees whose trunks bent in slow, thoughtful ways. Their roots wove above and below the trail like fingers in prayer. Cedric walked softly. Though he had not worn armor in years, his body remembered the rhythm of travel. His steps were even, and he kept one hand resting gently on the strap of his satchel, the lantern tucked safely inside. Above him, the canopy whispered, not with words, but with a hush that brushed the soul. The trees remembered him, perhaps not by name, but by presence. For the Etherwood was not merely trees and moss and wind. It was alive in ways that no scholar fully understood. Cedric paused beside a stone that jutted from the ground like an old tooth. Carved into it was a worn spiral, half swallowed by creeping ivy. He smiled faintly. "The pilgrim's mark," he whispered. Many lifetimes ago, such markers had guided travelers through the deep forest. Now they were all but forgotten. but Cedric still remembered how to read them. He turned left at the stone and followed a narrower path, one that dipped beneath hanging branches and passed by a brook that laughed quietly to itself. It was there, beside the water, that he met the hare. It sat in the middle of the path, quite still, ears tilted forward, its fur the color of soft ash. In its mouth it held a single white feather. When Cedric knelt, the hare did not flee. Instead, it hopped forward and dropped the feather at his feet. Then it looked at him, blinked once, and bounded off into the underbrush. Cedric picked up the feather. It shimmered faintly in the fading light, as though dusted with stars. He tucked it into the strap of his satchel and murmured a quiet thank you to the woods. By nightfall, he came to a glade lit by pale mushrooms and glowing moths. There he made camp, no fire, only a blanket and the quiet hum of forest breath. He held the lantern in his palm, still unlit, but he felt it warmer now just slightly, as though the woods had breathed upon it. Cedric closed his eyes and slept beneath a sky veiled in mist, where the stars peered down like gentle eyes and the trees hummed lullabies in a tongue that only the heart could hear. Cedric awoke to dew-damp air and birdsong drifting through the treetops. A gentle mist clung to the underbrush, curling softly around his boots as he rose. The lantern, still cold in his hand, now held a single pinprick of golden light, so faint that it vanished when he blinked, only to return again with his breath. He smiled. "It remembers," he said softly. As he packed his things and set off again, the forest changed. The ground grew soft underfoot, rich with moss and fern. Trees stood farther apart here, and the wind carried the scent of damp earth and distant water. By midday, the path led Cedric to the threshold of the Murkmire, a place few dared enter, even in daylight. It was not that the swamp was evil exactly. Rather, it was old, older than Virulin itself, older than the nights of the azure flame. Some said it was the last remnant of a forgotten sea that once kissed the moon. Others claimed the mire was alive, dreaming slowly beneath the muck and vine. Cedric paused at its edge. Twisted trees rose from brackish pools, their roots curled like claws. Long veils of moss swayed from their branches, and strange flowers bloomed silently in the shadows. Frogs croaked softly in the distance, and dragonflies hovered like floating gems. A narrow causeway of stone, half sunken and slick with moss, stretched into the mire like a forgotten road. This, too, was a remnant of the old paths, pilgrim ways, carved by lantern-bearers who once guided wanderers through the deep. He stepped forward. Each footfall stirred ripples in the shallow water beside the stones. Cedric walked carefully, his senses attuned to every creak, every whisper, every flicker of movement in the reeds. He passed a tree with bark like bone. Beneath it, carved in crooked letters, were the words, "Only memory lights the way." The phrase echoed what the Raven Scroll had said. He touched the lantern again. It glowed now, a quiet ember warm against his palm. As he moved deeper, time felt strange. Hours folded like pages. The light dimmed, though the sun still shone above the canopy. Sounds became muffled, as if the mire were pressing gently against the world, urging it to hush. Then, without warning, he saw her. She sat at the end of the stone path, her back turned to him, pale robes trailing in the water. Her hair was silver, though she did not look old, and in her lap rested a lantern identical to his own, except hers was alight, burning with a steady flame of soft blue. Cedric approached slowly. "I did not expect to find another keeper," he said. The woman did not turn. "I have waited long," she replied, her voice like wind through reeds. "The others are gone. Only the memory remains." He stepped beside her. Her eyes, when she looked up, were clouded but kind. "I am called Elira," she said. "I was once the lantern keeper of the southern glades." Cedric bowed his head. "Sir Cedric of Lorne, once of the azure flame. I was summoned." Elira smiled faintly. "Yes, the lanterns are fading, Cedric. Their light dims in the hearts of men, and the darkness grows bold again." He looked down at his own lantern. It now held a tiny, flickering flame. What must be done? Elira rose slowly, her lantern in hand. We must rekindle the heart of Etherwood. The last of the lanterns burns there, deep beneath the roots of the mother tree. But only those who carry memory may pass. Come. And so they walked side by side into the deeper mire. Above them, the stars began to blink awake, one by one, like the eyes of old friends remembering an ancient song. The path grew stranger with each step. The mire thickened, not with danger, but with mystery. Vines hung like ribbons from trees older than memory. Flowers bloomed in the shape of sleeping faces. Fireflies blinked in rhythm, tracing ancient sigils in the air. The deeper Cedric and Elira walked, the more it felt as though the mire were watching. Not with menace, but with familiarity, as though it remembered them both. The lanterns in their hands glowed brighter now, casting soft halos of golden and blue light that guided their way across twisted roots and stepping stones. There was once a city here, Elira said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. A city of light and silence, built among the trees, nourished by the spring of memory. Cedric turned toward her. You've seen it, she nodded. As a child, before it fell into dream, the lantern keepers were its guardians. We did not rule. We remembered. We listened. They passed beneath a stone arch, mostly sunken and moss-covered. The carvings on it were worn nearly smooth, but Cedric could make out the faint outline of a tree. A great one, with roots that reached into stars. The mother tree. Elira slowed, her breath catching. Ahead, the mire opened into a vast hollow, ringed by ancient stones. And at its center, rising from a pool of silver-hued water, was the base of a tree so enormous, so timeless, that Cedric felt as though he'd stepped into a dream from before the world began. Its bark shimmered like moonlight on water. Its leaves glowed faintly with green fire. Its roots were tangled and thick, some disappearing into the swamp, others arched like bridges over the glade. And at its heart, nestled within a hollow of twisting branches, was a lantern unlike any Cedric had seen. It was suspended in air, untouched by time or wind, and it was dimming. The heart lantern, Elira whispered. They stepped forward together, reverently. Cedric could feel the air shift, not heavy, not dark, but full, brimming with memory, like a song waiting for its final note. Why is it fading? He asked. Elira knelt at the water's edge, placing her lantern on a flat stone. Because people forget, she said. They forget the old ways, the stories, the paths through the woods. They turn from wonder and remember only fear. Without memory, the light cannot hold. Cedric bowed his head. His own memories stirred, of laughter beside campfires, of songs sung beneath banners, of tears shed beside fallen friends. He stepped forward and held his lantern aloft. The small flame inside it fluttered, then danced higher. The heart lantern responded. A thread of golden light reached out, linking the two, as though recognizing a long-lost kin. You remember, Elira said. That is enough. She joined him, lifting her own lantern. Their flames pulsed in unison. The heart lantern flared, first blue, then gold, then a brilliant, pulsing white that cast shadows in every direction and lit the water below like starlight. And then, silence. The light faded, not gone, but changed. The lantern now held a steady glow, calm, enduring, and the mother tree, it sighed. A low, gentle sound that echoed through the roots and branches, across the mire, into every hidden place of Etherwood. The glade grew still. Cedric felt peace settle in his bones. Elira smiled. It will hold now, for a time. He nodded, weary but content. The lanterns had not been saved with sword or flame. They had been rekindled with memory. In the days that followed, Cedric and Elira remained near the mother tree. The glade had changed. Where once the lantern hung dim and still, now the light shimmered softly through the hollow. Petals bloomed across the water. Strange birds returned to sing in the branches, low, melodic calls that felt like echoes of lullabies. At dawn, mist lingered like a memory, By twilight, the whole glade glowed with a soft luminescence, as though the tree itself were dreaming again. Yet Cedric knew this peace would not last forever. He sat beside the pool one morning, sipping warm nettle tea from a wooden cup, when he noticed a silver glint in the branches above. A raven. But unlike any bird he'd seen before, its feathers shone like moonlight on frost. It hopped down a branch and looked directly at him. Elira approached from the clearing. She bowed slightly to the raven. "A messenger," she said. "It has news." The raven tilted its head, then opened its beak. No caw emerged, only a whisper, a voice soft as wind through reeds. "The lanterns are stirring. One flickers in the hollow hills, another wavers in the skyborne towers, and in the valley of Ash, one has gone out." Then the raven took wing, vanishing into the morning haze. Cedric and Elira exchanged a look. "The hollow hills," she said. "That place has not known visitors in an age." "It seems it must know one now," Cedric replied. He rose, slinging his satchel over his shoulder. The lantern, still lit, now pulsed faintly with a second rhythm, as though aware of the new task ahead. Elira touched his arm gently. "You do not go alone." He looked at her. "I am no longer the keeper I was," she said, smiling gently. "But I remember the path, and sometimes that is enough." And so they began their journey anew. This time, they headed east, leaving the mire behind and climbing the stone ridges that overlooked Etherwood. The air grew clearer and the ground drier. Cedric could feel something pulling at them, a quiet hum, like a thread through the world tugging gently on his thoughts. Along the way, they passed old shrines carved into cliffs, their candles long since melted. They walked over bridges that swayed in the wind, bridges that had not been crossed since the old kings sang. Everywhere they went, they saw signs, tiny flickers of memory returning to the land. At one stream, they met a fisher who swore she had seen lights dancing beneath the water the night before, like little stars that had forgotten how to rise. At another clearing, they found children stacking stones in spirals, humming a song neither of them remembered teaching. And at the edge of a great stone valley, where mist clung low to the earth and strange shapes moved in the fog, Elira stopped. The hollow hills lie ahead. Cedric's lantern pulsed brighter now, its glow reflecting in his eyes. "I think they're waiting." The hollow hills were not what Cedric expected. He had imagined caves or valleys, perhaps deep gorges filled with echoes. But instead, he and Elira stood before a rolling expanse of velvet green hills, blanketed in fog that clung low and thick. The mist moved oddly, almost with purpose, as if it parted only where it wanted them to see. Small stones dotted the hills, arranged in curious rings or spirals. Some were carved with runes, others left plain, weathered by centuries of wind and silence. Cedric stepped forward. The grass was damp and soft beneath his boots. Elira walked beside him, her lantern lit, its blue flame dancing like a breath in the fog. Cedric's own lantern pulsed brighter with every step. "There is a silence here," she said softly, "but it's not empty. It's listening." Cedric nodded. He could feel it too, a stillness that wasn't lifeless. Something slumbered beneath these hills. They passed an old standing stone carved with a tree whose roots curled downward like fingers. Beneath it, a small pool reflected not the sky, but stars impossibly bright, as if the pool were a window into a deeper night. Cedric knelt beside it. His reflection stared back, but it was not quite his own. The man in the water wore armor unblemished by time. His lantern burned like a sun, and his eyes were filled with something that made Cedric's chest ache. "Hope. Elira," he said, still looking at the water. "Did others come before us?" "Yes," she replied. "Many, but most turned away. The hills only open for those who remember, those who still carry the ember." Cedric stood, his grip firm on the lantern. They climbed to the highest hill, where the grass grew thin and the stones stood tall like silent sentinels. In the center was a hollow, a depression ringed with runes that pulsed faintly under the mist. Within it stood a lantern stand, but the lantern itself was gone. Only a circle of ash remained. "This one has gone out," Elira said, voice barely a whisper. Cedric stepped forward. The ash stirred in the wind, and for a moment, he thought he saw something within it. A faint glimmer, like the last coal of a dying fire. He knelt and placed his lantern beside it. First, nothing happened. Then the light within his lantern quivered. A single thread of golden flame reached out, brushing the ash like a finger waking a sleeper. The ash shimmered. A voice rose, not from around them, but from within the earth itself. It was not words, but a feeling. Longing, sorrow, memory. Cedric bowed his head. And then light. The hollow filled with soft golden radiance as the ash rose and danced, swirling into the shape of a lantern. Not whole, not yet, but remembering, reforming. The stones around them pulsed in kind, their ancient runes glowing brighter. Elira stepped beside him. "You have rekindled what was lost," she said. "Not by force, not by fire, but by remembering." Cedric stood, eyes wide with quiet awe. "I didn't know I could," she smiled. "Most don't, until they do." As the mist began to lift, the hollow hills no longer seemed quite so still. Birds returned to the sky. The stones hummed with warmth, and the lantern in the hollow, once gone, now glowed gently, like a new star rising after a long night. Several days passed. Cedric and Elira wandered back through the forest paths, the hollow hills behind them, the road ahead open and golden with autumn light. Their lanterns glowed quietly by day and more brightly at dusk, their flames pulsing like twin heartbeats. Their next journey would take them skyward. High above the Etherwood, beyond the tallest trees and the highest cliffs, floated the skyborne towers, ancient spires that hovered among the clouds, held aloft by magic long forgotten. Few believed they were real anymore. Fewer still had ever visited them. But the raven's message had lingered in Cedric's thoughts. Another wavers in the skyborne towers, so they followed the wind. At the edge of the Emerald Plateau, they found what they were seeking. A winding staircase carved into a sheer rock face, hidden by flowering vines and moss. It spiraled upward, vanishing into mist. "It's here," Elira said, her voice soft with wonder. "I never thought I'd return." They climbed for hours. Birds circled below. The wind whispered through chimes that seemed to hang in the air without cords or beams, their notes gentle and strange. At last, they reached the summit. Above them hung the skyborne towers, stone spires floating in the sky, their bases cloaked in drifting clouds. Long bridges of light, woven like threads of moonbeam and starlight, stretched between them, allowing passage. Cedric stepped onto one bridge, breath held. It held firm beneath his feet, humming softly. They crossed toward the first tower. Its walls were covered in ivy made of crystal, leaves glowing faintly. The doorway opened without touch, revealing a chamber of mirrors and feathers, light and song. Inside, the air felt weightless, like the beginning of a dream, and at the center, spinning slowly above a pedestal, was a lantern. It shimmered with iridescent hues, blue, silver, violet, but its flame sputtered like a candle in the wind. Cedric approached, but before he could reach out, a soft voice spoke, not with sound, but inside his mind. "Who remembers the names?" He paused. Beside him, Elira knelt and placed her lantern on the floor. Its blue flame pulsed, casting light across the chamber's mirrored walls. Cedric closed his eyes and whispered, "Starborn, Cloud Walkers, the quiet choir, the ones who watched while the world slept." The flame within the skyborne lantern steadied. The voice spoke again. "Who walks with peace?" Cedric placed his lantern next to Elira's. "Ido." And the flame flared, softly, beautifully, casting prismatic light in every direction. The chamber sighed, and for a moment, the wind outside sang. Then the lantern lifted higher, whole once more. It spun slowly above them, casting warmth and clarity into every corner of the spire. Elira stood, brushing dust from her cloak. She smiled at Cedric, eyes shimmering. "You remember more than you know." "I'm just following the light," he replied. They remained in the skyborne tower that night, sleeping beneath floating windows that showed the stars, even through clouds. The towers hummed softly around them, no longer in mourning. When dawn came, they walked back across the bridge of light, their lanterns glowing brighter than ever. 2 lanterns had been restored. One still remained, and though the way to the Valley of Ash was uncertain, Cedric knew they would find it, together. The journey from the Skyborne Towers to the Valley of Ash was unlike any Cedric had traveled before. The air grew heavier, the colors muted. The trees thinned, their leaves turned brittle and pale, and the soft moss that once cushioned their steps became a carpet of gray ash that crunched beneath their boots. Elira walked silently beside him, her lantern's blue glow steady and calm, while Cedric's golden flame flickered uncertainly, perhaps reflecting the valley's somber mood. "This place feels tired," Cedric said softly, eyes scanning the landscape. Elira nodded. "It holds memories of loss and endings, the final place where a lantern's light should never truly fade. But here it has." They came upon a wide plain, the ground covered in ash as far as the eye could see. At the center stood the remnants of a great pyre, a circle of blackened stones cracked and crumbling. And in its heart, a lantern lay shattered, cold and dark. Cedric knelt and touched the broken glass. It was heavier than he expected, as if the weight of forgotten sorrow pressed down upon it. "Elira," he whispered, "how do we bring back a light that's gone out?" She smiled gently, placing her hand over his. "Not with fire or force, but with the stories we carry, the memories we share, the kindness we remember." Together they began to speak softly, the names of old friends, the tales of distant lands, the songs of stars and trees. Cedric told of the laughter by campfires and the gentle hands that mended wounds. Elira recalled the voices of those who had kept watch through darkest nights, the prayers whispered beneath silver moons. As their words filled the valley, Cedric's lantern brightened, casting a warm glow over the ash. Slowly, the pieces of the broken lantern began to tremble, glowing faintly from within. The shards floated upward, weaving together like threads of light and shadow. The lantern reformed, whole, radiant, and pulsing with a quiet strength. The valley seemed to breathe. Soft winds stirred the ash, carrying with them the scent of new beginnings. Cedric and Elira stood together, lanterns shining steady now, a trio of lights rekindled against the twilight. "The light never truly dies," Elira said. "It only waits for those who remember to bring it home." Cedric looked up at the rising stars. "Then we have done our part." And with that, they began their slow walk back, the valley's shadows retreating behind them, replaced by the promise of dawn. The journey home felt lighter somehow. The heavy gray of the Valley of Ash was replaced by soft hues of green and gold as Cedric and Elira retraced their steps through familiar woods. The lanterns they carried pulsed in quiet harmony, each a beacon rekindled by memory, hope, and care. Birdsong welcomed them at the edges of the forest. Leaves brushed their faces like warm hands. The air smelled of earth and rain and the sweet scent of growing things. When they reached the mother tree, the heart of Etherwood, a hush fell over the glade. The great tree's branches stretched high, shimmering faintly with the lantern's gentle light. The pool reflected all 3 flames, the golden, the blue, and the new, steady glow of the lantern from the valley. Elira stepped forward and lifted her lantern toward the hollow in the tree's trunk. Cedric followed, and together they placed their lanterns side by side inside the hollow. The lantern's light mingled and grew, spilling outward like dawn. The tree seemed to breathe, its leaves trembling with a song as old as the earth. Soft petals drifted down, carpeting the ground in colors no one had seen in years, pinks, blues, and golds glowing softly in the new light. Cedric looked at Elira, his heart full. "We brought the light back," he said quietly. Elira smiled, her eyes bright. "Because we remembered." In the days that followed, the forest whispered with renewed life. Creatures long hidden returned to the shadows, stepping into the sun. Streams that had slowed to a trickle sang again over stones smooth and bright. The lantern's glow in the mother tree never faded, a constant, gentle pulse like a heartbeat. Cedric and Elira walked the paths often, sometimes speaking in soft voices, sometimes simply listening. One evening, beneath a sky sprinkled with stars, they sat together by the pool. Cedric dipped his hand into the water and watched ripples shimmer through the reflection of the lanterns. Elira reached out and took his hand. "The story never truly ends," she said. "It lives in every step we take, every light we share." Cedric nodded. "Let's promise to keep remembering." The lanterns flickered softly in agreement, and as the forest settled into peaceful night, the whispers of Etherwood carried a lullaby through the leaves. A song of light, memory, and gentle adventure. A song to fall asleep to,